So we're recording. Brilliant. Hi, so I'm introducing Catherine today because I was just about to explain to Catherine, I'll do it now, we're recording, but we met a number of years ago as teacher-student, and I was the teacher and Catherine was the student. But as we were just discussing before we came online, it's kind of turning around the other way. Catherine has moved so far forward that I'm now inspired by her. And I think what's inspiring me is the way she's absolutely embraced what's going on and has leapt forward seismically in her personal development and her ability to reach people. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. So let's start from the Hi Catherine, it's so great for you to join me.
Thank you.
Let's start a little bit from, you know, where you've come from, what's your background, and you know, how we met, and you know, because I know you've got a degree in psychology and you've written books and stuff like that. So if you want to just say in your words where you've come from.
So I think it was a dozen years ago or so, wasn't it? And yeah, I came to you because I felt like, I didn't realize it at the time, but I needed the feminine guidance. I'd kind of got in a very masculine world of therapy, hypnotherapy, and you know, as a supervisor and a tutor, trainer, mentor, you kind of encapsulated all of those things for me, and you know, a new perspective, that more of a spiritual angle that I hadn't really looked at. I think up until then everything had been very intellectual. I think you pointed it out to me once, there was a lot of intellectualizing had gone on, and so a lot of head work, the degree, all the diplomas, I had to have all the certificates, you know. I had so many letters after my name at one point that I couldn't actually get them all on my business card, and I was so pleased. I've made it. I've got letters, you know, and I mean, I can laugh about it now, but I did take it quite seriously. And then, you know, there's you, and so natural, effortlessly so. And I'm like, how does she do that? You know, so I've been dancing with this authenticity thing for a long time. And I mean, that's just, you know, don't need to worry about any of that anymore. But certainly this thing of authority, you know, ever since I was a tiny child, there were authoritarian figures in my life, and the consequences for not, you know, keeping within those rules were quite.
That was something that came up quite a bit when we were working together those years ago, wasn't it? Sort of...
Yeah, it was just always there. It was always part of my life. You know, it's like the buzzing sound that you don't know until it stops how bad it was, you know, and how distracting and limiting it was. So it's not until really, I mean, we did a lot of work together, and it transformed my therapy practice, and it's just gone from strength to strength. I stopped to have my children. I think I met you before I had the first one.
You did, yeah.
And then I kind of ploughed through that, because, you know, you don't stop, do you? And then after the second one, it was like, no, I think I need a break. So yeah, I took a short break, and in that time, I did write a book. It was a novel, but it was very much, you know, all the psychology. And yeah, so that was my me time. And I did a few courses, reinvested in myself, but they weren't to get the certificates. I don't think, I mean, maybe there was a certificate. I don't think there was actually, but these were for me. And, you know, handing over the credit card with all the zeros on the end of this course, you know, you have to then step into, well, I must be worth it, you know. So all those things have happened, and it was really probably about 2 years ago, only 2 years ago, that I realized I was highly sensitive, and that it was a thing, you know, an HSP, highly sensitive person. So that's when I started to see myself, that I've battled through this noisy, distracting world, always trying to be everything all the time. And another thing about highly sensitive people is the mind connections with, like, we notice things all over the place. So it's you know, we're processing all the time, so it can be exhausting. And it was nice to actually realize that there was a reason why that was happening, you know, biologically. yeah, and then so that became an angle that I wanted to work with. And what followed on from that, it was like the first thing you have to do when you're highly sensitive and you're traumatized because of a lifetime of, you know, the noise, is to become safe again in your body. And I think this is where what you taught me came in about, you know, the head, the body. They need to communicate, don't they, really?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interestingly.
Tell me a little bit, sorry to interrupt you, but tell me a little bit about, you know, you have to integrate your trauma, or you have to, what was it, you recover from your trauma as an HSP. Tell me what that means to you.
It's recognizing that the trauma is kind of lying dormant in your cellular body, and at any time something can trigger a sort of an explosion, if you like, of trauma, which had happened consistently throughout my life, but I hadn't realized that's what was happening. So, you know, as an adult, somebody might say something or raise their voice, or something will happen that really just takes you back to that childhood trauma, but you don't realize, or you don't make the connection. I mean, you do as a therapist, don't you? But not always with yourself. So so there was a lot of work that I did on this one course I did, and it was unusual. I wasn't expecting it, but there was a lot of breath work and visualizing energies moving up and down through the body. So I feel like I've really become more centered, you know, in my core, and that connecting down to Mother Earth and Father Sky, and just having that centered feeling rather than being all over the place in other people's minds, you know, just bringing it back.
That's a wonderfully empowering place to be, isn't it? When you're referencing your own core instead of that person or that thing.
Not getting it from outside anymore. And it was so beautiful I remember walking along the road, and each foot on the ground just felt like I'm okay, you know, I'm safe, absolutely supported by the earth beneath my feet. Not because someone else had said something that made me feel better, or reassured me, or made me feel safe, or paid my bills, or any of those things that can make us feel unsafe. It was the ground beneath my feet. And I think it is maybe a mother thing, Mother Earth. You know, there's something about having a mother that is completely unconditionally there for you, like the ground beneath your feet. Unless there's an earthquake, you know, you can rely on that. And it is more than that as well. It's, you know, like the native EMFs from the earth and everything. It's just so supportive. And it was walking along, the sun was shining, and I knew I was safe, in a way that can't really be taken away from me. It is a practice, I think, that you deepen it and strengthen it, and, you know, there's other things you can do around relationships to help you be more sort of centered. But that was the main turning point, I think. And my love of nature has really grown from there. And there've been other things that I've done that have really sort of brought that out of me. I mean, the metaphors with nature are just, you know, amazing.
It is incredible. I mean, we're so far removed from nature, generally speaking. I don't mean you and I necessarily, but, you know, people have forgotten how to just come back to the real simplicity of what the earth offers you, you know, both in terms of your connection to it, your sense of belonging, and even your health. Your health is intimately connected with the vibrational frequencies of the earth, the microbes that come from the ground, the wind that blows through your hair. All of this is just,
it's so giving, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's giving, always giving. And, you know, and if you observe it as well, there's so many lessons to learn, but we don't observe it. Like you say, people are just rushing around between, you know, one concrete jungle and the next, heads down, and they're not really, you know, if you're not witnessing nature, I think in a way you're not witnessing yourself, are you? So yeah.
So let me just ask a question now then, because we've got a pretty broad picture of your journey. Something catapulted you into radical self-responsibility around about March 2020. And I'm wondering if you can take us, because what I really want to focus on, and we discussed this just before, is the way in which this, this crisis, this international crisis, global crisis since March 2020, has transformed those that were ready to transform, or those that were prepared to open their hearts and their minds and see through the veil. So take us back to March 2020 and what happened?
What happened? Yeah. God, what happened? What didn't
for
happen?
you?
So I was just jogging along nicely, and the irony, I just had an interview published in Authority magazine. So there was that word, my name in print, I must be an authority now. So everything was just as it was, still kind of going for these external permission, I think, to be myself. And then I noticed a couple of things that weren't quite right in March, and somebody sent me a link to something that I opened. I think I sent it to you, didn't I? And you knew all about this. And for me, I was sitting up in bed on a Sunday morning, and I was like, oh, this isn't right.
Do you remember what it was? Do you remember what it was, Catherine? What link?
It was that audio file, which was about, it was that vicar or pastor or somebody saying, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but this whole situation is leading to a vaccine, and this vaccine is going to be not what you think it is, and all this kind of thing. I can't remember everything that he said, but it just felt so true. And then, of course, you have to know that it's true by going and doing the research. So I was very grateful, even though it really spoilt my Sunday morning line. I was so grateful that someone gave me that, because it kind of tied in with some other things that I'd noticed over the years that other people weren't thinking about, like the economy, how crazy it is that we have this fiat system of debt. And, the more I think about that, the more I see that people are just climbing over each other to get money out of one pocket and put it into another, to pay their taxes, to pay their mortgage, so that they don't drown, and all these things. So I've done a lot of thinking and a lot of reflecting and observing, a lot of crying. I think I needed a big release. So early in the summer, when I'd gone down so many rabbit holes, because I have this need to know, and everything was making sense with the connections that were going on. But obviously, being sensitive, I didn't know, I should have slowed down really, but I didn't. And so I was re-traumatized. And I think what happened actually was a feeling of I can't be safe and really fully explore everything that I need to know about the world, because some of it is scary for people, and it was scary for me at the time, facing mass death that could be coming, and it's already been happening. And I'm not talking about viruses either. And what would we do, and what are my boundaries as to what I would put up with to buy a little bit of freedom, or that kind of thing. It was such a horrible time. And it wasn't until I got right into the very depths of it, the darkest of dark places I could ever have gone to, that and I accepted that I started to come out. And it was a case of, no, I know safety is important, but freedom is more important to me, if you have to choose. I mean, you might say that there's a way you can have both, and I do actually feel safe in a more spiritual way. But all the things that we take for granted as safety, like our home and our food source and all those kinds of things, they were all called into question. And you really have to look at, well, what would I do? Who would I be? And what compromises would I make? And I just thought, I'm not backing down from this. I've seen the world now. I've seen what they're up to. I've seen their tricks. Am I really just going to, let them do this without standing up for myself? And not just.
Yeah, what were you about to say?
I was just going to say, I'm not just standing up for myself here, because I know a lot of people don't have a voice, or they can't voice it, or they have reasons why they don't, or they can't put things into words. And I feel quite fortunate that I have words at my fingertips, so I became vocal. And there was a moment where, all the therapist who shows up in a certain way, who has, I'm offering this, that all had to change, because I had something else to say, and I've had to trust in that what I have to say is what needs to be said. And what's happened is so many people have started following me now, and they look out for my posts. You know, there was me thinking I'm just talking to myself, and people have said, you know, I take comfort from it, or inspiration from it, and I think, well, I'm just expressing what I need to express, you know, but it's resonating with people. So I've got to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, just to backtrack a moment where you said, you know, I understand their tricks and it forced me to the brink of, you know, like really assessing my safety versus my freedom, and freedom's more important. You said their tricks, I've been down the rabbit holes. I don't want you to go into any great detail, but what would you say was the biggest rabbit hole that opened your eyes? You know, what would be, let's put it another way, what would be the most accessible conspiracy theory that people could rapidly just look at and say, do you know, if you understood that, you'd understand what was happening to us?
An easy one. Okay, a few things spring to mind. I guess there's a few main pillars, and there's the legal system and there's the financial system. And I think other things come from that. Like, I think a lot of religion comes from, you know, making people think in a certain way. So a lot of mind control happens to make people not realise that they are sovereign. And I think the word sovereignty came about for me when I discovered common law. So, I mean, maybe the financial system is part of it, you know, that greed, but I think really there's an attack on ourselves, you know, that we aren't sovereign, that we are owned. You know, we have a birth certificate by the time we're 6 weeks old with a serial number on it, and we are owned, you know, we're handed over to the state. And so this ownership of us, I think, is what underpins everything. And I think if we take back ownership of ourselves, and there are ways to do that, you know, you can just step into it. I mean, I'm interested in this Magna Carta Article 61 because it documents things, and there's a system involved. And, you know, some people like to feel like they're in a system still, that some people can't cope with being outside of a system. But really, even deeper than that is that, you know, we have our own integrity. And I think we've been told that we can't be trusted with each other, that we will always fight, there will always be wars, we will always be trampling on each other. But that's because of the financial system, and because the elite have been, you know, putting these wars out there for financial reasons and for other reasons. Fear is a massive one, isn't it? So, I mean, if you take that everyone living in fear, can I pay my bills? Can I feed my children? And now it's like this virus, this invisible enemy thing, which, yeah, I mean, everyone has a different opinion on that, don't they? But I've done quite a bit of research, and that's another thing, learning about what a virus really is and what our bodies are. And this story that's been going around for 150 years, germ theory, it's so abusive to how we see ourselves, you know, because we now can't trust our bodies. We have to go to the doctor, we have to be medicated, we have to be, you know, jabbed with things so that we can leave our home safely and breathe the air. And, you know, there's no sense of trust that our bodies actually have what they need. So on a personal level, it feels like that is quite a key point, is if we can understand the difference between germ theory and the terrain model, where you know, our bodies are just cleansing all the time, they're detoxing, and no one's talking about the toxins, are they? And yet we're surrounded by toxins, and we're rebreathing, well, I'm not, but other people are rebreathing their own toxins that are trying to come out.
It's almost like carbon dioxide, you know, was terrible last year, but this year it's fine. Just put a mask on, it's absolutely fine.
Well, this is what's leading into the carbon tax thing, isn't it? You know, we all need to be responsible for our carbon and carbon dioxide, and obviously when you breathe out, tut tut tut, you know, you're contributing. Don't do that.
We just need to cull, you know, 6 billion people, and then we'll be fine, and we won't have so much carbon.
Yeah. But then they're chopping down trees to make way for things, aren't they? So
it is. Excuse me. How can I just cut that off? That might be an idea if I just pull that out. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so I mean the terrain versus germ theory, that's another massive leap that you've made this last year. And most people can't even contemplate opening your mind to the ideas that germs may be a construct. You know, and we know from the world of hypnotherapy, whatever you look for, you can find. Yeah. So we're taught from, you know, very early on in our practices that if you start looking for sexual abuse, you will actually lead your client into the notion that perhaps they were sexually abused when they sat on their uncle's knee when they were little and he jogged them up and down. Do you know what I mean? There's kind of whatever you look.
Yeah. If you look hard, and I think, you know, the language, because we've both studied language patterns and how they can help or hinder someone adopt an idea. And I think it was yesterday I was driving along and I heard on the radio one of these adverts. It says, can you look so and so in the eye and say that you have done everything you can? And it's using the assumption that germs are a problem. You know, it's using the assumption that if you go outside without all this PPE and whatever, that you are contributing to a problem. It's assumed, it's not questioned. You know, you're not allowed to question it. And I think it's been hundreds of years that we've been the setup of not questioning schools and education. It's all about, can you retain the information we give you and then regurgitate it, and then you'll get a gold star and eventually you'll get the certificate, you know. And you're not meant to question any of that, you know, and there's no time for it, and it's all competitive and there's no collaboration and cooperation. So I think there's been, when you see it, you sit back and you say, wow, they've been working on this from all angles. I do feel for people who can't see it, you know, because they would have to look at so many different angles and they can't get their head around germ meaning life, new life, you know. Now it means death, doesn't it? They twist everything and they put everything upside down, so that, you know, it just spoils everything. And I think it's hard for people to look at all these different angles. And you've got some other conspiracy theories thrown in that might be red herrings, you know, and that's just to discredit people. And it's really gaslighting, isn't it? Just all the name calling and the division and setting us against each other so that we can't see what we're really up against. That's the painful thing, I think, for a lot of people.
It's incredible how easily people have become so afraid, so programmed, and so scared of contact with their nearest and dearest. And, you know, this idea of sheltering in place and masking up and washing your hands and, you know, staying 6 feet apart. Could there be anything worse for your immune system? Could there be anything worse than for you to have no contact with people? You know, because I know you're a great fan of Tom Cowan, and I've been following him as well. But, you know, he says we are teeming with microbes, bacteria, and exosomes or viral particles. And that is the body's way of getting rid of toxins and waste.
And we can do that when we keep getting rid of them all.
If you haven't got any in your body, then how can you possibly build up some kind of, you know, resilience? How can you detox? How can you get stuff out? Because your body's just not prepared or primed for it. Would you say that, having followed Tom a bit?
I would say that the body will always try and clean and clear. So every minute of every day. I mean, it slows down when you're eating and digesting. So that's why they say intermittent fasting can be a helpful thing. But all the time it's trying to do it. But all the time we're stopping it. So we wear antiperspirant. We slather our skin with more chemicals, or we take antibiotics, and then the body has to stop, because it can only detox when it's got time to. It takes an enormous amount of energy for the body to do this, which is why when you get a cold or flu, you're exhausted. You know, you're meant to just stop. You're meant to not want to eat. You're meant to lose your sense of taste and smell so that you're not eating, so that your body can do the clearing. And if you interfere with that, the toxins remain and the problem deepens, and it becomes, you know, some people say, oh, I don't get ill, and it's not because they're healthy, it's because they've always interrupted the detoxification process, so that the problem has had to go deeper, and the body will create cancer or something to just cope with the situation that's not being coped with in a natural way, you know. So if people
I was going to say, so this is a paradigm shift. This is a complete shift away from this anti-life agenda, which is the vaccines and the isolation and all of the measures that have been put in place. It's a complete paradigm shift. I mean, how do you, you know, unless you've done all of the other background research, how can you explain this? Say, for example, to nurses who have spent their whole life battling germs.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, I've even tried, I thought if I can talk to my family, who, you know, they're a captive audience, well, not so much now, but, you know, I've thought people who value what I have to say, people who know I'm fairly intelligent, I'm not stupid, but actually these people have now, they would rather, this is the cognitive dissonance, they would rather see me as insane, someone they've known all their life, you know, they would rather see me as that than actually look at what I'm saying, which would blow their minds. You know, they haven't got time for all that. They don't want me to be right. They want there to be a virus, which, because then the government's helping them and looking after them, and it's a good government, it's a good parent, you know, and then they don't have to worry about all that kind of thing. And it's only really, I feel grateful that I've done a lot of the inner work on the parent side of things, you know. I mean, it's a lifetime thing. It's always, you know, you're always working on it. But I don't need a government to look after me now. In fact, I'd rather they wouldn't. But a lot of people, they can't go there. If they look at germs, then it's a can of worms of other things that don't make sense, that then they have to make sense of. And there's some really difficult stuff in there. So, you know, there's a project I'm doing with some people where we say we're going to have to meet them where they're at. You know, we're having to go right back to basics with like hand sanitizer. What is that? Is it antibacterial? Is it antiviral? What are they saying? Why are we putting it on our hands? You know, and asking questions rather than shoving information down people's throats, because they can't cope with it. But if you ask a question, their mind will have to answer it at some point, won't it? And they'll go away and answer it in their sleep, or, you know, at some point they will have to answer this puzzle, because the mind doesn't like, you know, unresolved things. So we've been using a different strategy, and I'm hopeful that these resources are going to be released to people like us, who we've got enough information ourselves, but we're so frustrated that we can't reach other people, and we need to see it a different way, that we need to get on their side, get in their corner, and not be fighting against them, because the whole thing is that we're going to fight amongst ourselves, and we will police ourselves and do most of the work for the elite, you know. So we need to come together, and I think that's been the final leg of my journey, if you like, so far. Not that it's in any way over, but coming back to, I don't need to win this argument. I need to understand where they're coming from so that I can be with them. I need to be able to support them. And of course, then you've got to do your own inner work. Why should I support that person? You know, but at some point, love has to be the primary thing. You have to love yourself enough, the other person enough, to say, I'm going to be there to help you, hold your hand through this. I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but maybe, you know, if we have done the work and we're not being triggered all the time, I mean, nothing bothers me anymore. You know, some things I don't really bother opening a lot of things now. I had to know everything before, and people will send me links and I might have a quick glance, but I feel like I've got a grasp of it now. You know, nothing major is changing. It's just the story is rolling out now. The evidence is backing up what I know. Yeah,
it's irrefutable. I mean, you know the overarching plan, so you know where it's going. It's the people who don't recognise the overarching plan, who think we're going to be out of lockdown next week or the week after, that you know, that are being led slowly by bit into a place that they're not witting. They're the Pied Piper of Hamlin is leading us, where you know, people don't know where they're going. That's why they're in such fear and trusting the government. But I think what you're saying is this idea of sowing a seed and having patience and just being as authentic and real as you can be without accepting the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune or whatever, and just letting them bounce off you. I think I put Rudyard Kipling's poem up on my wall the other day. If you can hold your head up high while all about theirs are losing theirs and blaming it on you, you know, there's that kind of dignity and ability to stand in your own energy with patience and love to show people rather than tell people, because words are so cheap, you know.
I have to walk my talk, and I think as well, being approachable rather than being prickly or forceful with all these ideas. If I'm not approachable, I'm not going to be any use to anybody. And there is a tendency for people to think, I've got to look out for number one. You know, we've been primed to think that way anyway, and things are getting desperate. We're heading into a depression financially, and I just think if we can be approachable, and the only way I can be approachable is if I'm not chucking out all this bad energy. So every day I have to have the right energy. I have to resource myself. And is that coming back to the core, feeling like I'm safe no matter what happens? Either that or safety isn't that important, you know, not like I'm, you know, flying off out everywhere, but it's just doing the work every day, you know. And if I can be out there just living a normal life, I mean, if there's a virus to be caught, I should have caught it, really. Don't ask me how I know that I should have caught it, but I mean, I'm having a good life, and there's something. It's very satisfying for me to have had 40 something years of not being this person and suddenly being this person. So everyone else is really bored in lockdown, and I'm like, wow, today is really exciting because I'm learning so much more about myself and how I am in the world. And yeah, it's fascinating.
Where do you think, I mean, I'll probably ask this to other people, but as well, when I get around to interviewing more people, but I mean, it's so hard to know, but where do you think we're going future-wise? Do you know, or do you not put yourself in that place?
Well, I know where we're meant to be going.
In terms of what they're planning, you know.
Well, the plan is that we're becoming transhuman, aren't we? And contained in smart cities, smart settlements, which will save the planet from us evil, parasitic humans who are overpopulated, or we think we are because we're so cooped up together. So that's where it's supposed to be going. And I don't know if it will. I think you can always have a plan, and then people will scupper that plan to a certain degree. So I think it's going to happen to an extent, but I think there is a divide, and I think there are the people who will know that they always have a choice. So many people don't feel like they have choices in life. I mean, when were they ever given a choice as children growing up? You know, it's not until you actually take back your own power that you say, well, I do have choices. They might not be very palatable choices, but that choice is more valuable than anything to some people, and it is to me.
What choices do you think you can have at the moment, Catherine? What kinds of choices can you make?
Well, my personal choices will be different from other people's, and it's horrible to sit here and say, well, we could sell our house and buy something smaller but be mortgage free, and then we wouldn't have, you know, repossession to worry about. So I can talk about practical choices, but they won't apply to everybody. And I think really the deeper choice is to say, did I come here to be manipulated and to be controlled and to believe what they're feeding me about what it is to be human? Or did I come here to explore truth? And you can't really explore truth when you're in fear. I think love and fear are opposites. I think love is the energy that we came here with, and fear got in the way. It's the polarity, isn't it, of being on earth. And so I think every day you choose between love and fear. I think you choose between light and dark, light being truth and knowledge, truth, wisdom, and dark being the things we haven't looked at, the shadow, or lies, things that are covered up, so I think the biggest choice is, on a level of, what did we come here for? And are we going to see that out, or are we going to, be bribed or blackmailed to sell out? And I'm not selling out. So whether I have another year or 10 years or 40 years, I think that might be pushing it. It doesn't really matter, and that sounds very throwaway. I don't mean to be, I don't not value my life. I really value my life. I think more now than ever. We've got some important work to do, but I'm going to be getting on and doing that work instead of worrying about how I can save my own neck. And I think that's where my powers come. There's nothing you can take away from me now that matters. I mean, I've got children, and I don't want to not be here for them, but I know from personal experience what it's like not to have parents around. So, and it was the making of me. I'm not asking for that to happen, but we all have our experiences in life, and we're here for the experience, aren't we? So
that's how you metabolize that experience and sort of allow the deeper lessons to stick comfortably with you. I think I show many people this diagram where you've got a bell curve, and you start off very close to source. Source is on the bottom, very close as a child. You get drawn away from source as you get older, and you get more enmeshed in the matrix and more enmeshed in fear and conditioning, and loss of self, until you decide to come back to source. And I think when you come back to source, you come back into your power, and you come to a place where you are indefatigable. There's nothing that anyone can do to harm you. Yes, they can harm your physical body, but they can't harm you.
Yeah. And it's so freeing. That's the ultimate freedom. It's not really whether you can go to the shops. That's not the kind of freedom. It's this ultimate freedom that you're in a body that has nerve endings, of course. Things can hurt and your feelings can be hurt, but it's whether we're attached to that or not. And I like that bell curve. It reminds me of I feel a bit like when babies arrive, they have nothing, but they have their mother's arms and whatever is given to them, and they learn to be materialistic in that they grab something and explore it. They're exploring the material world, and then we get really caught up in the material world with mortgages and nice cars and things like that. And then I think there's a process of dematerializing, shedding, coming back to what was there to start with, but with a deeper understanding. You've gone on the ride and you've enjoyed it and been thrown around a little bit, and then you come back to a certain stillness, like you had as a baby. You couldn't really move, but you were with all the feelings, and that was enough. A baby, just to look around the room and see how the light is cast, is fascinating, isn't it? And I think we can have experiences as we get older where we're satisfied on a deeper level with things that aren't material. But we're constantly being told we need the material things because that's all that's propping up the economy. Is that it has to keep circulating, so we have to keep buying things we don't need, which is really destroying the planet. I'm not, as much as I might talk about this green agenda, we are causing harm, but we're causing harm because we think we have to keep buying things we don't need, with the planned obsolescence and everything, because the economy wouldn't cope otherwise. And everyone's so scared of the bubble bursting. They don't want it to happen to them.
I know. What I find incredible is this idea of the poverty line. And if you live below it, then you are impoverished. You have a poor lifestyle. Well, I've lived below the poverty line for decades, but I have the richest lifestyle you could imagine. You know, I have everything I need. I have nature. I have my friends around me. I have my loved ones around me. That to me is wealth. It's not how much money I have or how many possessions I have.
I think that's going to be a big awakening for people, and especially with food shortages. And I know you do a lot with growing food and teaching people how to grow food, and being self-sufficient and resourceful in that way. I think we've put so much emphasis on dollars and value that way. And so instead of you having value to your neighbour, your value is to some corporation. Could be the other side of the world. PayPal takes care of it, you know, and they take a cut. And I think we need to come back to what is our value, you know, intrinsically in a way, the community. So I grew, what did I grow? Tomatoes was probably the biggest thing, and courgettes, way too many courgettes. Just as an example, we grew other things as well, but they were quite prolific. I don't want to just eat all those. And if my next door neighbour had been growing potatoes or something else and they had too many of those, it makes sense, doesn't it, to do that swap. And instead we're queuing up at the same shop to buy plastic wrapped potatoes, tomatoes, and bringing them home, and we're so disconnected from each other. And my hope, when you say what's my vision, I feel like people need to wake up to that and start to see that we all have value. We've been kind of primed to take on jobs that eventually the robots are going to do, aren't they? So we don't see that we have value, and we need to reskill. And I think before we can reskill, we need to get in touch with what we desire. You know, we all have to, if you ask a child, you know, what do you want to do, what do you want to be, they've got loads of ideas, and we squash those because it doesn't earn a living. But you know, it could be dressmaking or something, couldn't it? And if you know what you desire, that's something that's trying to come through you. Desire of the sire, you know, it wants to emerge from you. And I think this morning I put on Facebook about the seed that has to crack open in order for that growth to come through, and that happens in the dark. And it's like you close your eyes to hear, you know, the wisdom in the darkness, in order to know what your potential is and that you can come through. But you have to be prepared to crack open. And people are just like, no, not me, not now. And they can't just let go. I think we're all going to have to let go.
Absolutely. And you know, for those of us that have been on this journey earlier, you know, we're ready to let go. I'm ready to let go. I'm ready. Well, I probably did, you know, a while ago. All kinds of experiences, you know, where you experience yourself at one moment as this kind of like, as a professional therapist, I'm a professional therapist, and then, you know, stuff happens and you think, hang on a sec, I don't really want to be that person. That's not who I want to be. I want to be me. I want to be real. I don't want to wear this, you know, this profession like some kind of name tag around my neck that I can take off at the end of the day. You know, the way I work, it's me. You know, I've known, and you know, I don't want to put on a false persona to be somebody that I'm not. So yeah. So tell us where people can find you, Catherine, because I know you've got a brand new website. I looked on it the other day. I don't know if it's brand new. It looks new to me.
I did have it brought into the 21st century a couple of years ago. It's still very low tech, but yeah, the website is catherineblackwood.co.uk.
Is it Catherine Blackwood? Is it Catherine
either with or without? One's easier to say, one's easier to read. So with or without the hyphen. Catherine with a C. And I am on Facebook a lot, unfortunately, and MeWe. And I have a Telegram channel, which isn't interactive. It's more like a blog. I do have a blog. But it's keeping up with all these things, you know. It's I need to really pick a lane, I guess. But yeah, so website, if you want to get hold of me, my phone number and email will be on there. And Facebook is where I'm kind of interacting with people.
And you've kind of, since the beginning of Corona, you've done this kind of walking, talking therapy, haven't you? You've kind of graduated onto something quite new. Can you describe what it was you're doing?
Yeah, it was before Corona. It was the year before that, you know, the connection with nature became so important. And I'd always wanted to take the therapy outside. I didn't like being in the consulting room. And I'd had so many different consulting rooms over the years with something wrong with all of them. And but I didn't think, again, it was rules, you know, is it right to do this, to go outside with people? And all the questions of privacy, confidentiality, boundaries. And it really was, I mean, we spoke, didn't we, stepping into like something wants me to do this, I want to do this, and I'm just going to have to do it and figure it out as I go along. So yeah, I go outside with people. It could be the beach. It's got a slightly different energy to it from, say, the woods or parks or nature reserves, but we'll just walk around, pause, reflect. Something is always in the environment that is meaningful to the client, always. And so they take a lot of meaning from the actual environment, plus we're outside. And I think there's a lot to be said for when you're walking, you're using both sides of the body, and it connects the two sides of the brain. So it's so layered what we can get from being outside, as well as the physical benefits of being outside. And I think it's helped as well that we're walking alongside each other. We're not sat opposite each other in a chair. And it's not, this is my space and you can sit down and you can use my glass to drink your water. You know, we're together on the journey. So we're kind of journeying together. It's really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that around the world. I can only do that locally. So I do Zoom as well. I have Zoom clients.
Yeah. Lovely. Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure, a real pleasure. And I'm absolutely loving this peacefulness in you. It's really inspiring. You know, it's really beautiful to knowing what I know, from what I know you to be like. Always checking in, is this okay? Can I do that? Is that all right? So seeing this kind of like powerhouse, really, like this very still place in you. It's just a joy.
Thank you. And I'm just grateful for it, and I would love to bottle it and give it to other people, but I know it doesn't work that way. We have to walk it, but I can show that it can be done. So yeah.
Excellent. Great. So let's leave it there and stay on the line, and we'll just have a quick chat.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.